Ruth stood in black, her gloved hands trembling as they clutched the edge of the mahogany casket. The cold wind whipped through the cemetery trees, but her body didn't shiver from the weather. It shivered from something deeper, something hollow. Her husband of 36 years lay inside that box, silent, peaceful, and more of a mystery to her now than ever before. She hadn't cried yet. The tears wouldn't come. Not even when the priest said he was a devoted husband and father. Not even when her daughter Dana leaned in and whispered, "You okay, Mom?" Number Ruth wasn't okay. She hadn't been okay for weeks. Not since the hospital. Not since James had taken his final breath, looked at her one last time, and said, "Forgive me." Forgive what? The nurse had chalked it up to morphine. Dana said he was just scared, but Ruth knew. She felt it. Something had been wrong. Something was still wrong. She looked at the small crowd. Close friends, co-workers, distant cousins, people she knew, people she trusted. And then, a woman she didn't, slender, around 50, maybe younger. Dark red lipstick, neatly tied scarf, standing 3 rows back, alone. Not crying, just watching. Their eyes met. Ruth blinked. The woman didn't. Ruth looked away, heart tightening like a fist. A moment later, the woman was gone. Vanished. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just grief. But that night, while Ruth sat alone in the quiet house they once shared, the silence stretched like a void. The framed photos on the mantel mocked her. Smiling faces, vacations, Christmases, a life that suddenly felt like a borrowed costume. She pulled out her husband's old address book, something she hadn't touched in years. The leather was cracked. His handwriting, careful, neat, leapt off the pages. He had always been meticulous, always had rules. But even James couldn't hide everything. On the last page, tucked into the binding, she found a folded receipt. A hotel in Tulsa. A name, Marie Thompson. Last month, 3 days. The same weekend Ruth thought he was visiting a retreat for retired engineers. Her breath caught. Her fingers shook. She checked the date again. Same weekend. Her husband had lied. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that she remembered that weekend. How he came back distracted, distant. How he kissed her forehead like he was saying goodbye. The next morning, Ruth called the hotel. She didn't know what she expected. Maybe a polite sorry, no information. But the receptionist was young, chatty, too helpful. "Oh, Mr. James Milton. Yes, he came with his wife. They were very sweet. I remember she ordered wine and oysters on the second night. Is everything all right, ma'am?" Ruth didn't answer. Her throat was dry, her heart pounding. "His wife," the girl had said, but she hadn't been there. She hung up, her knees buckled. She sank onto the kitchen floor, her head in her hands. "What did you do, James?" she whispered. "Who was she?" She didn't tell Dana, not yet. Her daughter had enough to deal with. The funeral, the bills, the constant condolences. Ruth needed answers first. Proof. She started digging. His emails, password protected. But James wasn't clever. His passwords were always the same. She guessed it on the second try. And there it was, an inbox full of folders, one labeled Marie. Dozens of messages. "I wish I could wake up next to you every day." "Ruth doesn't suspect anything?" "Let's wait until after Christmas." Ruth's chest ached as she scrolled. Each message was another knife, another lie, another piece of the man she thought she knew falling away. Then, one email, dated 6 weeks ago. A scanned marriage license. Ruth stared. Her name wasn't on it. Marie Thompson, James Milton, married, legally, out of state, 3 years ago. The world blurred. She couldn't feel her legs, couldn't hear the ticking clock. Just the ringing in her ears. Her husband, her James, had been married. To someone else, while still married to her. And she hadn't known. No one had known. Or had they? Then, The knock came. 3 soft raps on the door. Ruth wiped her face, stood, walked slowly to the hallway. She opened the door, and there she was. Marie, standing in the doorway, not with rage, not with shame, but with something far more dangerous. A calm, cold smile. Ruth didn't speak. Her lips parted, but no words came. Marie, still in her elegant trench coat and black heels, tilted her head slightly, as if amused by Ruth's silence. "I thought it was time we met," she said softly, almost kindly, like they were old friends. Ruth's fingers tightened around the doorknob. Every instinct screamed to slam the door in her face, but her legs wouldn't move. Her mind was still catching up to reality. Marie stepped forward, not entering, just leaning in. "I assume you found out?" she asked, glancing at Ruth's trembling hands. "James always said you'd find out eventually. He just hoped it would be after he was gone." Ruth's breath caught in her throat. "You were married," she whispered, "to my husband." Marie smiled again, but there was no warmth in it. "Your husband? Is that what you still believe?" She reached into her bag, pulled out a stack of papers, and gently handed them over. "I have the documents. Everything's legal. We got married in Nevada. He said you'd never agree to divorce, so he took matters into his own hands." Ruth stared at the papers. Signatures, dates, a photograph. James with Marie, holding hands in front of a chapel. Her knees wobbled. She turned away, walked back into the house without a word, and Marie followed. "Don't worry," Marie said, closing the door behind her. "I'm not here to fight. I just thought we could be civil. For James's memory." Ruth wanted to scream, to cry, to break something. But instead, she walked into the kitchen, placed the papers on the table, and stared at the kettle. "Tea?" she asked, her voice hollow. Marie sat down like she belonged there. "Sure, why not?" The whistle of the kettle felt like a scream boiling beneath the surface. Ruth moved slowly, deliberately, setting 2 cups, pouring hot water, her hands shaking just enough to make the cups clink. She slid one toward Marie, sat down across from her, and looked her straight in the eyes. "How long?" she asked. Marie didn't hesitate. 7 years. We met at a conference in Chicago. He said his wife didn't understand him, that you two hadn't shared a bed in years, that he was lonely. Ruth's lips twitched. "We hadn't shared a bed because he snored like a train, and I have arthritis, not because I didn't love him." Marie shrugged. "He didn't say that part." Silence stretched between them, thick and choking. The tea grew cold. "He left you money?" Ruth asked suddenly. Marie raised an eyebrow. "He said he would. He wanted me to be comfortable. I quit my job because he promised to take care of me. That's why I'm here, Ruth." Her tone shifted, softer, but edged with steel. "He left me nothing, absolutely nothing, and I know why." Ruth's eyes narrowed. "Do you?" Marie nodded. "Because of you. Because even in death, he was afraid of you." Ruth laughed, sharp and bitter. "Afraid of me? I cleaned his bedpans, Marie. I sat through chemo with him. I listened to him cry when his brother died. Afraid? Number." He was ashamed. Marie leaned back. "I don't want your sympathy. I want what I'm owed." Ruth stood. "You're owed nothing. You were a secret, a lie, a distraction." Marie's eyes burned. "I was his choice." Ruth didn't flinch. "Then you chose wrong." Marie stood too. "He promised me the beach house." Ruth's heart skipped. The beach house, her parents' place, passed down to her. James had always hated it, said it was too far, too old. But it had been in her name, hadn't it? She ran upstairs, Marie's heels clicking behind her, threw open the drawer where the deed had always been. Gone. She ripped through the folders, the files. Gone. "Looking for this?" Marie asked from the doorway, holding up a manila envelope. Ruth froze. He gave it to me, 2 weeks before he died. Had it notarized? Ruth took a step forward, her voice low. You need to leave. Now. Marie tilted her head again, mockingly. Or what? Ruth didn't answer. She simply pointed to the door. Marie paused, then tucked the envelope back into her bag and walked out slowly. But as she reached the porch, she turned and said, You might want to check the bank accounts, too. Then she disappeared into the rain. Ruth stood there for a long time, staring into the wet gray world beyond her porch, her heart cracking in places she didn't know were still vulnerable. She didn't know how deep the betrayal went, but she was about to find out. That night, Ruth didn't sleep. She sat at the dining table in her nightgown, surrounded by opened files, old documents, sticky notes she'd scribbled in the past few hours, trying to make sense of a life that was no longer hers. Her tea had gone cold again, untouched. Every tick of the grandfather clock echoed like a countdown to something she couldn't name. She stared at the printed bank statements Marie had mentioned, the ones James always handled. Her own name was missing from 3 of them. There were transfers, regular ones, thousands of dollars wired monthly to an account she'd never seen. The recipient? Monsieur Thompson? She felt a slow, searing burn rise from her chest to her throat. Her husband hadn't just loved another woman. He had funded her life. While Ruth stretched groceries, while she fixed the leaky pipes herself, while she turned off the heat at night to save a little more. He'd been living a second life. Comfortably, lavishly. Ruth finally allowed the tears to fall. Not loud, not theatrical, just silent and unstoppable, like a dam cracked after years of pressure. It wasn't just the money. It was the deliberate, calculated way he'd erased her while she still stood in his home, cooking his dinners, wiping his brow, believing she was the one he'd chosen. At 3 a.m., she stood slowly, walked to the mirror above the fireplace, and stared at her reflection. Her hair was silvering at the roots, her eyes swollen, her skin tired. But there was something sharp in her gaze now. A flicker of something old. Pride, maybe. Or rage. The next morning, she went to the courthouse. It was still early, the air crisp, the sky clouded. She requested a copy of James Milton's most recent will. The clerk found it within minutes. Ruth's fingers tightened as she unfolded the papers. Page 1, page 2. There it was. In the event of my passing, I leave the entirety of my savings, assets, and the deed to the Milton Beach property. To my wife, Marie Thompson. Ruth stared at the sentence. Her name appeared nowhere. Not once. It wasn't just betrayal. It was erasure. As if 36 years of shared life meant nothing, as if she had never existed. She walked out of the courthouse numb. Her heels clicked on the stone pavement like a metronome marking the tempo of grief turning into something colder. She didn't cry this time. She couldn't. That afternoon, she visited the law office that had handled their family affairs for decades. Mr. Delaney, the family lawyer, was older now, slower, but kind. He blinked in disbelief as she laid the will in front of him. This can't be right, he muttered, adjusting his glasses. James updated his will 2 years ago. You were the sole beneficiary. Apparently not, Ruth said flatly. He made another one, out of state. Nevada. Mr. Delaney exhaled. It's legal. I'll have to look into the jurisdiction, but this complicates things. Does it? She asked. Or does it clarify everything? He hesitated. What do you want to do, Ruth? She looked at him, her voice firm. I want to take back what's mine. That night, she began the process, quietly, strategically. She didn't scream at Dana. She didn't call the neighbors. She called an estate attorney, one who specialized in fraudulent marriages and contested wills. She printed every bank record, every receipt, every message between James and Marie. She even sent herself copies of the email attachments in case her computer was accessed. Then she booked an appointment with the notary who signed the beach house transfer. I'm sorry, the woman said. but Mr. Milton assured me the property was his to give. He didn't mention a first wife." "He had one," Ruth said coolly. "He still does. That marriage was never dissolved." The woman paled. "Then he committed bigamy." Ruth didn't blink. Yes, he did, and so did Marie by agreeing to it, she thought. But she didn't say it aloud. Not yet. She needed more. 2 days later, Ruth stood at the gate of the beach house. It looked just as it always had. Blue shutters, white wood, her mother's rose bushes along the porch. But something was different. The silence felt owned by someone else. She stepped inside. The lock hadn't been changed yet. Marie was in the kitchen, barefoot, sipping wine, music playing softly. She turned, surprised, but not startled. "Well," she said, "I was wondering when you'd show up." Ruth walked in slowly, closing the door behind her. "You moved in fast." Marie leaned against the counter. "I always move fast. You know that now." Ruth placed a folder on the table. "You might want to look at that." Marie opened it casually, then frowned. Her eyes scanned the documents. Proof of the marriage overlap, banking fraud, notarized testimony from Ruth's lawyer, and most damning of all, the certified copy of Ruth and James's marriage certificate dated 36 years prior. "You can't prove he didn't divorce you," Marie said quickly, too quickly. Ruth raised an eyebrow. "Can't I?" She pulled out the final paper, a certificate from the county confirming no divorce records existed for James Milton in the last 4 decades. Marie's smirk cracked. "So that means—" "You were never legally married to him," Ruth said. "And every asset he left you is contestable, especially when acquired under false pretense." For a moment, Marie looked small, weak, but then her jaw tightened. "You think you've won?" Ruth smiled faintly. "Oh, darling, I haven't even started." Marie didn't move, but her eyes darted between the papers and Ruth's face, trying to find some kind of opening, a weakness, anything. "You think they'll believe you?" she finally said, but her voice had lost its edge. Ruth stepped forward, her voice calm, almost gentle. "Believe me? Marie, they don't need to believe me. The documents do the talking." She walked past her, trailing her fingers lightly across the countertop, across the chair where James used to sit when he still hated this house. "You broke into a life you didn't build. You wore it like it belonged to you. But this place? These walls? They remember me." Marie turned sharply. "He loved me. You can't take that away." Ruth turned too, meeting her gaze. "Maybe he did. Maybe he loved both of us. Or maybe he loved no one but himself. Either way, that love won't hold up in court." Marie laughed once, bitter and hollow. "So what now? You sue me? Drag it all out? Public shame? Is that what you want?" Ruth's eyes didn't waver. "I want the truth to stand. I want what's mine. And I want you to understand one thing. You didn't just steal a man. You stole years of my life without even having the courage to look me in the eye." Marie crossed her arms, but Ruth could see her chest rising faster now. Fear or fury. Maybe both. "Fine," Marie spat. "Take the house. Take the damn money. I don't care. You can't undo what we had." Ruth gave a faint nod. "I'm not here to undo. I'm here to reclaim." She took the folder back, slid it into her bag, and started for the door. "I'll have a formal eviction filed by Monday. You'll have until the end of the week to leave." Marie's voice cracked behind her. "You think you're noble, don't you? Like some silent martyr? You're pathetic." Ruth paused at the door, her hand resting on the knob. "Maybe I was, for a long time, but not anymore." And she walked out. She didn't cry. Not when she reached her car. Not when she looked at the house in the rearview mirror. Not when she drove back through the winding roads of their past. What she felt wasn't sadness. It was clarity. A strange, steady kind of peace that comes when the lie finally stops breathing. Back home, Dana was waiting. She looked up from the couch as Ruth entered, her eyes puffy and anxious. "Where were you?" Ruth sat beside her, setting the bag on the floor. "The beach house," she said. "I had some things to handle." Dana hesitated. "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." Ruth turned slowly. "What is it?" Dana swallowed. "I got a call from Dad's old accountant. There's another account, offshore. I didn't know about it either, but it's in your name." Ruth's heart skipped. "What?" "It was opened 21 years ago, in Turkey, under your name, but with a different address. There's a lot of money in it." Over 400,000. Ruth stared at her daughter, trying to process the words. "But why would he?" Dana's voice was gentle. "I think he was hiding something, or protecting something." "I don't know, but it's yours." Ruth leaned back. The room spun slightly. A hidden account. In her name. All this time. "Can you send me the details?" she asked. Dana nodded, then hesitated. "I also found emails between Dad and a man named Chem. They talked about the arrangement and not telling her. I thought at first it was about Marie. But, Mom, I don't think it was." Ruth's fingers went cold. "Then what?" Dana shook her head slowly. "I think it's about someone else. Someone we don't know about." Ruth felt the floor shift beneath her again. Another secret. Another hole in the life she thought she understood. She looked at her daughter, her voice firm but quiet. "Then I think it's time we find out exactly how many lies James Milton left behind." The next morning, Ruth woke early, long before the sun began to rise. The air in the house was heavy, like it held its breath along with her. She sat at the kitchen table again, but this time there were no tears, no shaking hands, only purpose. In front of her was a printed trail of every email Dana had forwarded the night before. James and this man, Tim, had exchanged messages for nearly 2 decades. Most of it coded, vague, full of phrases like, "monthly transfer confirmed," "keep her name off the record," and "until she turns 18, everything goes through me." Ruth's chest tightened. She knew what she was reading. Somewhere out there was a child. James's child. Not Marie's. Not hers. Someone else. A third life. A third betrayal. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She reached for her coat. Dana called from the hallway as Ruth slipped on her shoes. "Where are you going?" Ruth paused just long enough to say, "To meet the accountant." Then the consulate. "I need answers." Dana watched her mother walk out the door, a woman transformed. No longer a grieving widow, but a quiet storm gathering speed. At the accountant's office, Ruth sat stiffly across from a thin man with tired eyes and a folder too thick for comfort. He adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Mrs. Milton, I handled this for your husband for many years. He was very specific. The account was structured under your name to avoid detection, but you had no access without his death certificate and proof of identity." "I have both," she said. He nodded. "Then I'll be blunt. Mr. Milton was sending money to a guardian. The recipient's name was Cem Yildiz. He lives in Bodrum. Every month, a wire went to his account for the care of a girl named Elif. She's 22 now. We were instructed to cease all transfers after your husband's death, unless contacted directly by you." Ruth felt her stomach flip. "Why me?" "Because you're listed as her beneficiary." The room spun. "Beneficiary?" The accountant opened another envelope, sliding forward a document. "He named you her trustee. If she ever needed anything after his passing, it would come from you." Ruth's fingers hovered above the paper, but didn't touch it. Her voice cracked for the first time that morning. "Why didn't he tell me?" "I don't know," the man said softly. "But I think he wanted to. The last note he left on the file was dated 2 days before he died. It just says, 'Ruth deserves to know everything.'" She drove home in silence. No music, no radio, just the hum of her thoughts and the weight of truths she'd never asked for. When she walked into the house, Dana was in the kitchen, sipping coffee, eyes puffy from sleep. Ruth sat down, looking at her daughter carefully. "You have a sister," she said. Dana blinked. "What?" "Her name is Elif. She lives in Turkey. She's 22. Dana's mug clinked against the table. "Are you serious?" "As a heart attack," Ruth said, her tone dry. "And he made me her trustee. Left her everything he hid." Dana was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked the question Ruth hadn't dared voice. "What are you going to do?" Ruth stood slowly, walked to the window, and looked at the garden beyond. "I'm going to find her," she said. "And if she's anything like me, I'm going to make sure she never feels the way I did." That night, Ruth lay in bed, clutching the last photograph they ever took as a family. Her, James, and Dana, at the beach house before the world cracked open. She stared at his face, frozen in time, smiling like nothing could touch them. But everything had. And now, piece by piece, she would uncover every lie he left behind. Not with bitterness, but with the same quiet dignity he tried to erase. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it arrives in silence, with a passport, a plan, and a woman in her 60s who finally knows who she is. 2 weeks later, Ruth stepped off the plane into the soft, unfamiliar heat of the Turkish coast. The air smelled of salt, jasmine, and something ancient, like a memory waiting to be unearthed. She had never traveled this far alone, never thought she'd be walking foreign streets at 61, searching for the child her husband had hidden from her. But there she was, passport in one hand, a worn leather bag in the other, and a photo printed from Elif's university social media page tucked safely into her jacket. She had studied that face for hours. Dark curls, almond eyes, a sharp jawline she swore was James's. The resemblance had hit her like a slap, but she wasn't here to cry. She was here to look that girl in the eye and say, "You exist, and you matter." Sem's address was easy to find, an old yellow stone building near the harbor, shaded by olive trees. Ruth knocked, once, twice. Then the door creaked open, and an older man with deep lines and tired eyes appeared. He looked at her for a long time, as if he already knew. "Ruth Milton?" he asked in accented English. She nodded. He stepped aside. "Come in." His home was modest, sun-warmed, filled with photos and books. Ruth's eyes scanned the walls, pictures of Elif as a baby, as a child on a swing, as a teenager in a school uniform. Sem motioned for her to sit, then poured 2 cups of strong, bitter tea. "He never told you," he said softly. Ruth shook her head. "Not a word." Sem sighed, folding his hands. "Elif's mother was unexpected. A woman James met while traveling for work. He supported them from a distance. The mother passed when Elif was just 4. He asked me to raise her. He trusted me." "But he didn't trust me?" Ruth asked, not bitterly, just trying to understand. Sem looked at her with something almost like pity. "He said you were good, too good. That you wouldn't survive knowing. That it would break you." Ruth let out a soft, humorless laugh. "He didn't know me at all." Sem nodded slowly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he couldn't bear seeing your face when he told you?" Ruth's voice dropped to a whisper. "Does she know?" Sem hesitated. "She knows her father is dead, but she thinks he was a distant benefactor, a businessman with guilt." Ruth blinked. "She doesn't know his name?" "Only his first name. James. She never saw a photo. It was my decision." Ruth set down her tea, her hands suddenly too tight with emotion. "Then she deserves the truth." Sem looked at her for a long time. "You really came all this way?" "Why?" Ruth met his gaze. "Because if she's part of him, then she's part of me, and I won't let her carry his lies like scars. She didn't ask for this, but neither did I. And maybe, just maybe, we can give each other what he never gave either of us: honesty." Sem stood, She's at the university now, studying to be a doctor. She'll be home tonight. If you want to wait? Ruth nodded. I'll wait. That evening, just after sunset, the door opened again. Footsteps. Laughter. A voice. Young, bright. Uncle Tim, I got the books you... She stopped in the doorway, her eyes locked with Ruth's, and for a moment, neither moved. Elif, Cem said gently. This is Ruth. She knew your father. Elif stared, confused, curious. You knew James? Ruth stood. Her voice was soft, but steady. I was his wife, the first one. The room went silent. The world tilted. Elif's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Cem. Is this true? He nodded slowly. It's time you knew everything. And as Ruth sat back down, facing the daughter she never knew existed, she felt something unexpected stir in her chest. Not grief, not rage, but something close to hope. Elif didn't speak for a long time. She just stood there, the books in her hands slowly lowering to her sides, as if the weight of truth had suddenly shifted gravity itself. Ruth watched her carefully, searching her face for flickers of emotion. Anger, confusion, pain, but what she saw instead was restraint. Deep, practiced restraint. When Elif finally moved, it was to sit down across from her. Her voice, when it came, was controlled, but low. So you're the reason he never came? Ruth blinked. What? He sent money. He sent letters. Well, not really letters, more like instructions. He asked Uncle Tim to send updates. But he never came. Not once. I waited every birthday until I was 16. Then I stopped. Ruth leaned forward. I didn't know. He never said a word. He lived a whole life with me, with our daughter. Elif's eyebrows shot up. You have a daughter? Dana. She's 34. Your half-sister. Elif sank back into the chair, her voice bitter. Of course he had another daughter. A real family. A real home? Ruth's heart tightened. He built that life on lies. You weren't the only one left in the dark. I gave him everything. 36 years. I thought I knew him. Elif glanced at Cem, then back at Ruth. And now you're here because... Ruth held her gaze. Because it's time the lies stopped. Because you deserve more than money wired from a ghost. You deserve your story back. And I came to give it to you. Elif laughed once, sharp. You think flying here with a suitcase full of shame will fix it? Ruth didn't flinch. Number I think looking you in the eye and saying, you are not a mistake, is the least I can do. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded, thick with every missed birthday, every question Elif had been too afraid to ask. Cem stood gently. I'll give you both some time. And then he left, closing the door behind him. Ruth's hands rested in her lap. He was terrified of being seen for who he really was. That's why he hid you. That's why he hid everything. Not because of who you are, but because of who he wasn't. Elif looked at her, her voice softer now. And what about you? You stayed with him all those years. Why? Ruth exhaled slowly. Because I believed in who he pretended to be. And when people show you kindness, even if it's not whole, you hold on to it, especially when you've given up everything else. Elif looked down. Her fingers trembled slightly. He used us both. Yes, Ruth said quietly. He did. A long silence. Then Elif looked up again, eyes shining but defiant. What now? Ruth reached into her bag and pulled out another folder. He left you money, not just the fund through Cem. He had an account in my name. Offshore? He meant it for you. He just didn't have the courage to say it. Elif stared. Why would he do that? Because he was too weak to love you out loud, but he loved you in secret. And I'm not here to defend him. I'm here to make sure that if he left anything good behind, it ends with you, not him. Elif took the papers slowly, scanning the numbers, the names. I don't want anything from him. she said. Then take it from me, Ruth replied. From one woman betrayed to another. The air shifted again, slightly warmer now. Elif folded the papers and placed them in her lap. You really didn't know about me? Ruth's voice cracked. If I had, I would have found you sooner. Elif nodded slowly. I believe you. Outside, the first raindrops tapped against the windows. Ruth sat still, watching this young woman she should have known all her life. And then, like the quietest miracle, Elif whispered, Would you maybe want to meet me again tomorrow? Ruth swallowed hard. I'd like that very much. And in that moment, not everything was healed, but something was mended. Two strangers, bound by the same man's cowardice, had started to rewrite the ending he never had the courage to face. The next morning, Ruth stood in front of the little cafe Elif had named the night before. A modest place near the sea with mismatched chairs and the smell of strong coffee hanging in the air. She had dressed carefully. Nothing too formal, nothing too casual. A soft blue blouse, her silver hair brushed back, and a small necklace Dana had given her years ago. She didn't want to impress Elif. She just wanted to show her she was real. Elif arrived 5 minutes late, breathless and flushed, her curls damp from the coastal breeze. She looked different than the night before, less guarded, though the edges of her posture were still cautious. Ruth stood as she approached. Hi, she said. Elif gave a small nod. Hi. They sat. The waiter came and went. Coffee was poured, and for a moment neither of them knew where to begin. Ruth decided to go first. I don't expect anything from you. Not a relationship, not forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Elif stirred her coffee slowly. Why now? Why fly across the world for someone you never met? Ruth looked her in the eye. Because your father made me invisible. To you, to himself, and I won't let him do that to you too. You deserve the truth, even if it's messy. Elif nodded slowly. Messy is accurate. She sipped her drink, then looked out at the sea. I used to imagine what he was like. Sometimes I hated him. Sometimes I told myself he had a reason. I think I needed both stories to survive. Ruth's heart ached. He was charming, quiet, controlling in gentle ways. You never realized it until too late. I thought he loved me. I still think, maybe, part of him did. But he was a man made of walls. Elif gave a soft laugh. That sounds familiar. They talked for over an hour, about Dana, about Ruth's garden back home, about Elif's dreams of becoming a pediatrician. They avoided the deeper wounds, not out of denial, but out of caution. Like two people who knew the road they were walking was fragile, but worth it. At one point, Elif reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. I found this last night, in one of Chem's old boxes. It's addressed to you. I think he wrote it, but never sent it. Ruth took the envelope with trembling hands. Her name was scrawled across it in James's familiar hand. She stared at it for a long moment before opening it. The letter was short. Ruth, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I didn't deserve your kindness. There are things I never told you, things I should have. You were the best part of my life, and I failed you. I failed her, too. I wish I'd been brave enough to face what I'd done. But you always were the brave one. J. Ruth folded the letter carefully, her eyes glassy but dry. Coward to the very end? She said quietly. Elif looked at her. Do you regret loving him? Ruth was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I regret trusting the version of him he sold me. But love, even when misplaced, doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. Elif sat back, her arms crossed lightly. I don't know how to feel. Part of me wants to scream. The other part wants to know everything. What he was like. What I missed. Ruth gave her a gentle look. Then come visit. When you're ready, I'll tell you everything, good and bad. Elif didn't answer right away. Then she nodded. Okay. That evening, as Ruth packed her bags for the flight home, she placed the letter in the front pocket of her suitcase. Not because she forgave him, but because his lies no longer held her. She wasn't leaving with shame. She was leaving with something far rarer, the beginning of truth. When she arrived at the airport, her phone buzzed, a message from Elif. Tell Dana I'd like to meet her sometime. Also, thank you. For coming? Ruth smiled, tucked the phone into her bag, and looked out at the runway as the sun began to set. She had come to this country chasing ghosts. She was going home having found something better, a second chance neither of them had ever expected.